All right, so this week you get a break from my talking head because we're going to just outline a little bit about arguments in philosophy. And if you've never taken a philosophy course, don't worry. This isn't going to be a strict philosophy course, but this week we do have to kind of be introduced to the topic. So we have to know that any ethical study is really grounded in philosophical study. And there are some rules that we agree upon in terms of embarking on ethical study, because we really do have to have rules. Otherwise, it's I say, I think, you think, I'll think, and there would be no consensus. So especially when we're talking about ethical theory, moral theory, what is right and wrong, we want to have a place to ground that. So what we usually do is think about arguments. And what I want to do is say, especially in a bioethics course, we are not arguing. We are not going to be having a fight about anything. And that's what people usually think about. And they usually think about that as being won, and often being won by the nature of someone's charisma or their persuasiveness. What is going to be persuasive in an ethical argument is going to be how rationally you lay out your claims. And you lay out your claims by positing certain premises. And so that's what we're going to do. We are going to choose certain truths that lead us then to a certain claim. And just so that we all understand what kind of things we're talking about there, we're talking about a premise or premises and then conclusion. What we need to understand is that some of the premises that we look at this semester, we're not all going to agree on. Life begins at conception. Life begins at birth. Life begins at viability. Those are where a lot of our arguments are going to be. So some of our arguments are even going to back up, and we're going to have to prove our premises. But this is the kind of thing that we want to be talking about, because we don't want to necessarily launch into, is abortion right or wrong? What we want to do is look at the different claims that get us to, is abortion right or wrong? So at the bottom here is an argument. Pepperoni makes me sick, therefore we should not get pepperoni on the pizza. That's an argument. One, the premise is true, and so the conclusion is true because the premise is true. These, of course, get more complicated. In terms of validity and soundness, we may have reference to an invalid argument or an unsound argument. So what we need to be looking at is that, does the conclusion follow from the premises? So we can say, the sky is blue, my name is Mercedes, therefore we should eat pizza. That's totally invalid. One thing has nothing to do with the other. What should also be true then is that we're looking at if it's sound. And so to be sound, everything has to be true, and basically the conclusion has to follow from the premises. So if all those things are true, then an argument is sound. Otherwise, it's of course unsound. What we can look at then is whether some arguments are going to be absolutely true based on the validity of the argument and, of course, the truth of the premise, whereas other things are only going to be likely based on those things. And unfortunately, in philosophy, we're often dealing with things that are likely, so we're looking at inductive arguments. To give you a couple of examples here, if I say, this is one that's used in philosophy all the time. All humans are mortal. Socrates is mortal. All humans are mortal. Socrates is human. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. All monsters are furry. Grover is a monster. Therefore, Grover is furry. And you hear me using these therefores. So that's what that's some of the lingo that we're going to be using as we move through. Again, you don't have to have a course in philosophy here. You just want to know some of the words that I'm using. And here is the most important point. You do not attack an argument by going after its conclusion. You attack an argument by going after its validity or the truthfulness of its premises. That's where you're gonna win, because there's no way that a conclusion could be true if the premise aren't true or if the argument is unsound. So that's what we want to do. So that's one of the things that you often see in the media is people will jump right to the conclusion but skip all the premises, skip everything that's making something true or false. And you'd have a much better argument if you actually start at the beginning and look at logical reasoning or look at the background of something. But it's so much sexier to jump in and just knock heads with kind of opposing conclusions. But we don't want to do that. We don't want to knock heads. We want to spend time together. We want to challenge each other, but we want to do it kind of grounded in philosophical reasoning. Okay? That's a little boring, but just so that we're all starting off on the same point. And there's lots of resources out there if you want to learn more about this. But this will hopefully at least give us enough to get started. All right? Thanks a lot. That's too long, but I'm sorry. At least we'll be grounded well. Thank you.